Season 3, Episode 9. Passion on and off the sports field. Body talk. I didn't really read the article. I looked at the picture, says Trajce. Alan and Sara burst into fits of laughter, while Sara admits that she reads the comics before the news. Sara recounts a tale of tennis players who recall the play-by-play points of their matches, even those played 20 years ago. She asks, how do you temper this passion required to be a world-class winner when behaviours are deemed violent by regulators? A pervasive culture of masculinity? To carry yourself with dignity and do the right thing in a sustained basis is sometimes difficult, and men can be challenged by their role expectations in society, Alan postulates. Sara asks the boys to define precarious manhood. She presents the idea of a pervasive culture of masculinity in sport, at work and in relationships. The idea of bigger, better can be aspirational, says Trajce. Sara argues that there is oodles of research that shows that these reinforced expected behaviours can manifest in stress, anxiety and violence. In the courtroom, both parties can lose dignity and court should be considered a last resort to resolve a dispute, Alan remarks. He recounts a case that describes the pattern of fighting and make-up sex between a couple, which can be considered in the context of precarious manhood, because of the linkage to aggression and primitive ownership framed by sex. As a practical work or personal relationship strategy, Sara describes a method to disclose point-in-time energy levels to negotiate a pattern of communication and support and manage expectations. The boys laugh about the idea of the unicorn in dating conventions. I wouldn't know anything about that, protests Trajce. They're just mythical creatures to me.
Yeah, willing and able. DJ Code Red, Saber. We're gonna get this started. Yeah. This is how we starting it. Let's get started, 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 let's get started. Who's gonna start this? We're gonna start this.
Hello and welcome to the Why Work podcast series. You are listening to Trace Vitkovsky, Sara Pizzell and Alan Girl. Okay.
You kick off your sports story.
Oh, all right. Sara, this is usually when you say what's happening. All right, I'll kick off. Well, hey, welcome back. How's it all going?
Excellent.
Yeah.
Trajce, let's reflect a little on season 2. We talked a lot about the sports field. The sports field work from anywhere.
Yes. Oh, yes. And because A, you'll have to reflect, and B, I am reflecting because I just remember reading a story in the Courier Mail, or actually Sunday Mail, and I didn't really read the article, but I looked at the picture because Sunday Mail, there's like about...
You're such an educated man.
I love that you admit that, because that's me all over.
No.
I look at the cartoons first, then I go back to the stories.
Well, no, I had no choice.
Okay,
because
why?
the article's like about 50 words and the picture was like half a page. So
what's it about?
Well, and the reason why I say that is because a picture does tell 1,000 words, and it was about the Biff. I think it was the Norths. We mentioned Norths a lot. Parents opposing sides, of course. The stadium fight spills over onto the oval, and it was the most appalling display of parents behaving badly on the football pitch. So I thought it was you used the word reflection, and I thought, yeah, I'll reflect. Isn't that funny that this stuff we talked about just that week, there was a picture in colour of these parents going at it, hammer and tong, and what an example to set to your kids.
So we've talked about the culture of sport without losing the spirit of sport, where you really want a fight. A game has to be on. You want people to be passionate about what they do, but that spills over in the sports field, on the sports field, and it can just go overboard. It's really hard to know when those boundaries stop. Once adrenaline's going, once you have a biochemical change in the body and you're on and you are ready to fight or flight, have that stress response, right? You're aggressive. You're aggressive, and you need to get this win on the sports field. What do you do, right? So you've got it on the sports field, and we've got health and safety issues because that's your workplace. We've talked about with Andre Agassi and Pete Sampras, and we talked about the fight that happened in the stands among two old guys. So I relayed a story in Palm Springs, and now you're telling me also on the school field?
On,
Where
on
was
the
this?
stadium, on the sidelines, the parents just so they're
Was it a school sport?
No, it was just a game between two teams on a weekend. But isn't it interesting that this fight literally became a fight? Yeah, it's almost like there's so much pent-up aggression that the spectators were participating in the spectacle.
Absolutely. They can be more aggressive than the guys on the field at any time,
you mentioned
guys
that
and gals, right?
last time. Yeah, so I just thought it was interesting that, talk about reflection, I was just reflecting what was in the Sunday Mail, so that was pretty interesting.
When have you not seen somebody or a parent or a family member get angry at a sports game? And what is culturally acceptable? Or is it just me? Do I go to sports games and maybe it's... am I cheering it on a little too passionately?
Oh,
do you guys
you get
see
into
this
it.
often?
Oh,
I see it all the time.
Yeah,
Do you?
Do you get angry at other parents?
No, I don't. I don't, but I see it.
Do you yell from the sideline?
I get excited. I do the more
Do you
championing.
vocalise that excitement?
Yeah, I do. I champion the stuff that goes great, and I may just go, "Oh, damn!" I mentioned earlier meeting some tennis players, and Jeff Coetzee was a coach, and he was coaching a great player, Gonzalo Escobar, and I started talking to Gonzalo, and come to find out, he knew one of my tennis buddies, my friend's son, who is like a stepson or a nephew to me, Andre Dome, played tennis in America. This guy, the minute I mentioned Andre's name, they knew one another. He knew one another. He had played against him in college. He knew in detail the score, game by game, total match. He knew when it turned. He remembered everything. These guys are so passionate about their sport. It took a second for him to recall everything. And then I realized I was at that match in San Francisco with his mum.
Right.
I hadn't even put it together until he started to relay more of the story. And he said, "I'm sorry, I really had an injury. Please tell Andre I'm sorry," because it changed the emotions of the game. Andre was winning until he took an injury break. Right. But I relay that because it's just so much passion, so much commitment. They live it. They're in it. And how do you extract that if you want things to be tamer?
Well,
how do you have that passion and be tame?
Well, I can relate to that. I've certainly, perhaps to the extent of these professional tennis stars, I've now progressed from yellow
You made the
yellow to purple.
The bouldering.
to blue.
You're blue. You're bouldering.
No,
you made it.
I've moved beyond blue.
Where are you now?
I've transcended. I can do at least 2 of the purple.
2 purple out of how many purples?
Oh,
What
it's
are the
about
options?
10, but
Right, so
yeah,
you're moving
but
up the ranks of the purple.
Yeah.
So that doesn't mean an awful lot to me. So just explain what that means.
So beginners, so for example, Alan, you might start at yellow. Sarah, of course, will go to white, which is the highest.
I'm not a climber. I don't profess to be a climber, but
In fact,
I'm
I'll talk
keen to
about-
learn. I don't mind.
We'll talk about another form of climbing in a minute, aspirational stuff in a second. But let's get to the rock climbing. Yes, you start with yellow, blue, purple, green, orange, red, black, and then white.
So purple's climbing up there.
It's a big step though. The from the yellow to the blue is manageable. Blue to purple is next level. But I know my point of this is I think I know how your famous professional friends would feel once they've
Do you
achieved
remember
that.
every element of that, each purple
Absolutely.
accomplishment?
Oh, absolutely. Yeah. It took about 50 goes to get it. But the point is, hey, it's all part of this new let's get physical. To quote a famous pop star.
I just
Let me hear your body
I just
talk.
taught yoga this morning. I covered it.
Your body talk.
Body talk.
Body talk. We should call this session body talk. But
I covered a yoga class this morning, and I thought, just because I was in the moment, and it was like, you get the feel, the milieu, and I thought, let me just try this. I didn't really plan it, and I instructed everyone in progressing. Hanumasana is the splits, and I actually hadn't done the splits in a while, and I was curious, but I got there. On both sides, I can still do splits.
Well done.
There you go. Well done.
Thank you.
It's very,
But,
very flexible.
honestly, I do a sport engagement. I engage in sports, and I don't recall it that much thereafter. I just live it in the moment and go, cool, and it just fades away. I would not remember the details of that kind of game, but maybe that's why I'm not a pro athlete.
Well, Alan, do you play golf?
I have played golf, yes. Yes.
Do you play a sport? I mean, we've never asked you. I know about your gardening
I
and your
have
extensive...
played a lot of sport in the past, but I don't play sport at the moment.
What was your thing back in the day?
Probably field hockey.
Oh.
Probably mostly, yeah.
I remember you talking about field hockey when we first met. That's funny. So it is a part of you. It's part of your DNA.
What was your position?
Because I played with Robin, of course.
Oh, of
Yeah.
course. Robin Burgess Limerick, a professor who helped guide me through my PhD. And he's so humble. You know what he would say? I'd introduce him to my son. I said, this is my teacher, my professor. My son was probably 6 at the time or something. And he said, well, actually, I'm still learning from you too. And I was like, what?
That's
So
very
he's
humbling.
so humble. He
No, that is
he
good.
kept his mutual learning, is what he'd always say.
Alan, what was your position?
Centre left.
Okay. Ooh, very strategic. Centre left. Ooh, important.
Was this in college? The two of you played.
It was through uni, yeah. I played, and at high school, of course.
Cool. Good on you. No. Oh, good stuff.
Who's gonna start this? We're gonna start this. Press play and plug in the microphone cable.
To start this off, I'll give you a case, and it demonstrates that, and we're looking at this from the perspective of men, there's a lot of challenges in life for men, and to carry yourself with dignity and to do the right thing is sometimes difficult. And in this case, the parties don't have names; they just have letters. So, to preserve their dignity, the individuals were known as the letter R and the letter H. Now, I don't actually know their names, so I've made up these names: Roberto and Henrietta, which is probably nothing like their real names. But Roberto and Henrietta had a relationship, and in the end they ended up in the Supreme Court, which is why we have the case judgment.
Now pause. Trajce and Alan, to you, what is precarious manhood? That's a big term just to use. So let's
So
frame this.
precarious manhood, I suppose it's both men and women, but we're talking about manhood. There are many challenges in life, and to be ethical and proper and carry yourself with dignity and to make the right choices can be very difficult. It can be difficult to do those things.
And what does precarious manhood mean to you?
Well, I think I'll echo Alan's sentiments, hence the term precarious. It's that balancing act of trying to get on with things with grace, style and dignity, but by the same token, accept that you are indeed a man, and with that comes those responsibilities.
There's a culture of masculinity that can be reinforced through society, as though there's expectations. Like we've talked about aggression on sports fields, like we've talked about how a man should feel, represent themselves, have emotions or not have emotions, what emotional range is acceptable. And it's not just pervasive among men. Women can reinforce that stereotype about what's expected also. So it's that cultural framework and the climate of what's expected.
We might even be moving into a community where you don't talk about manhood or womanhood anymore. It's really just about people and how people conduct themselves.
Indeed, just to make it clear, my reference about the size of the raptor and the Hilux, that has nothing to do with manhood. It's to do with aspiration. In this late stage of capitalism, where it's bigger and bolder and better and rougher, that's where I was going for.
We can't discount that there are stereotypes that exist for reasons, right? Stereotypes exist because there are trends, and we can't negate oodles of research that talks about the challenges of masculinity and what's pervasive and the concerns that men might have because they're expected to behave a certain way or because they do behave in such a way that aggression manifests or violence manifests from those types of reinforced expected behaviours.
Well, what you often see in the courtroom environment is there'll be a dispute between two people and they ventilate it in the court. And my sense is both parties lose dignity as a result of taking matters to court. And so court really should be your very last resort.
Is that what this case is about?
Well, maybe. I wasn't involved in this case. All I know is the judgment. But the judgment's an interesting read. So Roberto and Henrietta met in Perth. That was in the late 1980s. and Roberto and Henrietta had a fairly fiery relationship. Their son described their relationship as tumultuous. And what would happen is Roberto and Henrietta would fight, and sometimes the fighting got a bit physical, and then they'd make up and they'd have sex. And then they'd fight, and then they'd have sex. And they met in Perth, and Roberto moved to live with Henrietta in her unit in Perth. And then after a while, after being together for a while, they moved to Brisbane, and they wanted to live in the suburb Stretton, which is a very nice little suburb. And whilst they were in Stretton, they would fight, and then they would have sex, and then they would fight, and they would have sex.
So here's an example of what could be precarious manhood, when if through fighting the manhood is threatened and they respond with masculinity, and to take control, a man suggests sex. Now, I don't know in this case. I'm just saying that's an application. Sex. No, correct.
It doesn't actually say that in the judgment, but certainly looks like it could be.
Could be make-up sex, but if you're putting it in the context of precarious manhood and masculinity, when your manhood's threatened, what do you do to respond? And that can be through aggression, and it can be through sex can be an expression of aggression depending on how it unfolds. As we're hearing about in the media now, it can happen in the military, it can happen in construction, you name it. Keep going.
Well, Henrietta even got a restraining order to restrain Roberto.
From the sex or the aggression?
The aggression.
Or they all in one? That's what I'm getting at.
But they continued to live together.
This reminds me of, remember those 50s, the show, was it The Talking Horse, or when they were, with the couple quarrelling, they'd paint a white line over the like from the wall to the bed, so you stay on this side and you'd stay on that side.
What was the horse?
Remember Ed? Was it Ed the Talking Horse? A horse is a horse, a horse. Yeah.
Is that Australian?
That? No, it's American.
What?
We're talking like the 50s.
Okay.
But anyway, I remember I was painting the white line.
You
stay on this side. So there you go. That's a bit like
so
some
remind
type of...
me. Remind me. I'm going to tell you about
exclusion zone.
A little tip that a woman spoke about on a webinar the other night. So remind me. But go back.
Anyway, then Roberto proposed to Henrietta.
Of course, as you do.
Yeah. And
to secure things and to maybe own and claim her.
Well, that's one way of looking at it.
I'm looking at it because you talked about precarious manhood.
10 years. 10 years.
Right.
So they've been together for 10 years. He proposed to her and she declined.
Go
so
Harriet.
He was very upset about that. And said some unfortunate things.
Okay, and you see how I'm connecting it now to ownership? Or keep going.
Well, it doesn't talk about ownership in the judgment, but maybe you're right.
I'm colouring it.
Anyway, then Roberto discovered the internet, and he started developing a relationship with someone over the internet.
This is 90s, you said? 1990s?
I think it might have been Kyrgyzstan.
In Kyrgyzstan, one of the stands. We were talking about Kazakhstan, Uzbekistan, in a stand.
So anyway, Roberto wanted to go over there and meet her.
All right, so pause.
Internet connection.
A friend of mine, during the pandemic, there were all these like discounts to have more global access to your online dating profile, I'm told. And so he had all these contacts in Russia and all the stands, and he's like, check out the women on their profiles. They get all dressed up, like, dressed to the nines, and they've got like PhD chemical professor, but they can cook and they look good too. And they would profile this. So he's like, wow, I like the women in the stands and in Russia much better than Australia. I mean, they're having all kinds of conversations and beyond.
Yeah, but the technology is so good now that it can just create the image.
It could, right? Anyway.
Yeah, no, completely artificially created.
We got some competition. The girls in Stan. Okay, in the stands.
Right, so Henrietta wasn't too upset. In fact, she drove him to the airport so that he could go to Kyrgyzstan.
See ya.
And see ya.
Because statistically, the probability of coming back could be...
Well, she's already
bring those women back. Go for it.
So she was quite confident that she could just send him over there.
Yeah.
And he sent back love cards. He sent back postcards.
Oh, how sweet.
For her and for the cat too, apparently.
The cat, okay.
And he came back after a few weeks and admitted that it was a mistake.
Oh,
and then he proposed to her again, And again, she refused him.
Wait. I just need to put this in perspective. Rather than appreciating you for who you are, I went over, found another alternative. I thought that was going to be my pot of gold. It turned out the grass was not greener. She really couldn't cook, and the PhD was a lie, right? And in fact, my unicorn was actually just a fat donkey. So I'm coming back and disappointed. I don't have the perfect world. Coming back to Australia, you're my plan B. Right? Will you marry me? I missed you. I love you.
Well,
Can I
tell
you?
the rest of the story, look up the meaning of unicorn, because she wasn't a unicorn, but the anyway.
A unicorn is often like the whole package in dating.
I don't know any of this stuff. That's why I'm silent.
Are they a unicorn? There's all these matrices to work out if you're a good dating unicorn. Oh, okay, I'm going to show you my unicorn. I don't know what your unicorn is. Anyway.
No idea. I just thought of it as being a mythical creature.
And
you're so
just
cute.
for the records, I'm not a unicorn.
Okay.
All right, and then so they're back in Australia, and the sex stopped.
Okay.
So the fighting continued, but the sex stopped.
I love how you knew that. Okay, so there are unicorns who are considered to be like the best magic unicorn. It's almost magical.
My son Lindsay told me that, so that's how I knew.
Oh, okay. You want to explain that to us?
Yes.
Thanks, Lindsay. Keep going.
Thanks, Lindsay. And anyway, then Roberto develops a relationship with a Canadian woman, and it was at this point, so we're about 2 decades in, he gets his solicitor.
Where's Henrietta?
They're still in the same house.
They're still in the same house,
Yeah.
Okay.
And he gets his solicitor to write to Henrietta and says, your tenancy is now finished and you'll have to vacate the premises.
Housing is expensive right now.
At
Henrietta's
which point,
still in the house, okay.
Henrietta laughs off the letter and says, I'm not going anywhere.
All right.
And that's when
Awkward.
Roberto goes to the Supreme Court and seeks a declaration that they're not in a de facto relationship. And because they're going to the Supreme Court, then Henrietta makes a counterclaim where she seeks a declaration that they were in a de facto relationship.
Part 19 of the Property Law Act.
Yeah,
Yes.
and that means that she gets she gets a portion of whatever the joint estate is. He had a sizable income and she had virtually no income. So it was much more important for her. But in the end of the case, it was decided in her favour. The court declared that they were in a de facto relationship. But I think in terms of precarious manhood, I don't know who R and H were, but I'm sure all their friends and colleagues know of the case. Wouldn't take long for it to get around. And all that detail about their relationship is now in the public arena in a case report.
Yeah, there's that expression in family law, if they do go to trial, it's the airing of all the dirty laundry.
Yeah.
It's such a risk because of the intimate and personal details. I mean, commercial litigation, you can look at contracts going awry, repudiation, but when you look at people, you're looking at reputation, not repudiation.
Well, it's a very personal and emotional thing.
It's a very risky business going into that, but
Roberto should have manned up and said it's a de facto relationship and we need to sort it out. You know?
It sounds very dysfunctional. Just like you can have a dysfunctional organizational climate, this sounds like a dysfunctional housing, social, family relationship, and a climate where there certainly was disparity, aggression, thinking about some of the psychosocial factors that you're talking about.
The fighting sex.
Yeah, and stereotypically...
But the thing, of course, is the case ends with their biggest fight ever was the fight in the Supreme Court. So what happened after that?
Oh, you're asking if they had makeup? Who knows? It might be documented. If it were reality TV, Trajce, right? It's all public. Just like this, when you go to court now, this is all public.
Reality.
And reality TV
now
is
with
all
the amount
public.
of televised cases.
And that's that sort of contest culture when masculine traits are rewarded, stereotypical masculine traits are repeatedly rewarded and reinforced and honoured.
Well, we're seeing right now, which of course when this broadcast will be in the future, but right now we're seeing the members of the royal family, of course, all over the media. And back home we have Robert Smith all over the media.
Yeah.
This is bringing up a lot of cause for concern about potential, aspects of precarious manhood and masculinity contest culture. And think of all the folks who had to speak up, who might have had what at the time was unpopular, disparate ideas or beliefs about what unfolded, and they had to be very brave to recount what they believed happened. When you have a decorated military personnel, highly regarded, and having to go against public opinion is very difficult. So men have had to do it, and women have had to do it with the Me Too movement, and it's happened for both sexes.
Well, he had the choice. He had the choice of walking away from the bad media and just copping it on the chin, or bringing a defamation action against the media. And so, yes, he went to trial. So everything was brought out. All the dirt was dragged out in that trial.
So is precarious manhood a response to any situation with the use of aggression, threat? And so basically you're getting aggro. Is that precarious manhood? That's the only way you can deal with the matter, by going feral. So in this case, whether
I think you clearly shouldn't. You clearly... Yeah,
that's what
But you're talking about the culture, the contest culture. When you get a threat, your response is aggression. To dominate, right?
Yeah.
Sexually or through violence or through aggression,
threats,
incivility, that
control,
kind of thing. So
coercion.
And it can diminish, it can escalate, it can diminish, and the boundaries of what's acceptable or not acceptable
Well, people
dissolve.
try to use the courts that way. They try to use the courts to control and bully and dominate. But it means that everything's going to be dragged out. It means it's all going to be in the public arena.
And you both talked about having a very conciliatory process, even when you were on competing ends of a legal spectrum, if you will, representing different causes or cases.
Do you think precarious manhood has been at least controlled or sustained in the workplace? So in other words, are we seeing a diminished precarious manhood?
Not yet. It takes such a long time to change culture, let alone to understand the snapshot in time. First you have to investigate what's that climate, right? And we already know that there are, executives who are mostly men, and how men are paid better, and, go on through the list. So you've already got some reinforcement with disparities and equities happening. And so it won't just happen on the pointy end of what's tested and what's paid, is what's culturally accepted to get to that point. What's the trajectory to get to that point?
Oh, I see. So what you're saying, so even if we can put a lid on, say, the yelling and the fists, let's say, say if we can control that, the other issues, the equality aspects.
Look at politicians. How many are male, right? What's allowed in a position of power, right?
Yeah.
And, I just let me bring it back down into the micro in this webinar that I said, remind me to speak about. This woman spoke about having a balance at home, and she said it's never 50-50. So I thought, this is interesting. A good partnership with your partner is never 50-50. It's always a balance and a sway, but if it can happen respectfully and with disclosure, you've got more chance for success. So I thought, that's interesting. Let me listen in. So she spoke about saying, if I come to this podcast today and there's 3 of us, so, divide 100% by 3, 33%, 0.33. And I say, what have I got? What have I got to bring? And, well, gosh, I've been smacked around the last couple of weeks, so I've got 10%. Today, guys, what have you got? Trajce is like, I'm feeling great.
Trajce always has 100%.
150.
As an example, and Trajce says, I got 70% to bring. And you say, well, I can make up, what was that, 80? I can make up easily. I got more than 30%. So we're good. We can run this show. We'll carry it, right? So in a partnership, it was between the two, 50-50. I'm home, man, I've had a day. I've only got 30. And if your partner can say, that's okay, I got 70. Or if they say, I'm at 25. You say, you know what? That white line, that horse you talked about, we need a little space so that we don't intersect and cause conflict to one another. We don't want to drain one another. So let's each retreat. And just that conversation, it's a quick benchmark. It's a kind of a nice way to have that conversation, to disclose where you're at without the whole, are you okay?
Yeah, or
too
rather,
deeply.
Or
get to the point of some escalation and just saying, you don't appreciate me, and feeling,
that's
disturbed.
what I took precarious manhood to mean, that inability to, getting back to your point, Alan, about not having that sort of dignity and humility and grace, just suddenly you default to that threat, the aggression, and just that violent, if you like, approach. That's what I thought precarious manhood implied.
Well, there is also, and I know you want to talk a little bit about a case involving sexual harassment, but statistically it's usually the man that's sexually harassing, but not always.
Not always. Not always. We're talking about my mate, but it's we're talking about like when manhood is defined more by social proofs than biological proofs, right?
So that's precarious manhood.
That sort of idea, correct?
But the element of aggression and threat, though, that's a fundamental ingredient.
That's the contest culture. When you're threatened, how do you respond? Well, I will dominate, and how am I going to dominate? What's going to make my win? I started to watch last night as I was falling asleep. What did I watch? L.A. Confidential, right? And have you seen that?
I know.
A movie a long time ago. And the cops who are more aggressive get more reward, right?
Who's gonna start this? We're gonna start this. Press play and plug in the microphone cable. Next up is the crew willing and able, satisfying your thirst. Come and clean on the verse, precise and
We hope you enjoyed that episode of Why Work. You've been listening to Trajce, Sara and Alan. And if you'd like to know more about some of the things we've talked about today, please subscribe, and we'd be more than happy to provide you with information and other things that may interest you. Please be aware that none of the matters we've talked about today should be construed as legal advice or any other type of advice. We're just here to talk about all things related to work. See you next time.
I'm just saying, culturally, this is just a celebration, where the
it will fulfill your needs.
Kana Yamahimi are venerated.
Let's stop. I'll go down the loop.